Christmas Wish, written by Mark Barazan, published by Barazan Publishing on December 7th, 2024. Copyright December 2024. The flickering lights of a sparse, uneven Christmas tree cast dancing shadows on the peeling walls of the tiny apartment. James sat beneath it, clutching an old photograph. It showed a younger version of himself, beaming, with a child on his lap beside a brightly decorated tree. His shoulders shook with quiet sobs, the edges of the photo curling under his trembling fingers. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he whispered to the empty room. His eyes drifted to the tree, its faint glow a reminder of the better times. If only I could bring even a little of that magic back, just once. It wasn't the lack of presents or the peeling paint on the walls that brought tears to his eyes. It was the overwhelming weight of wanting to do more for those like him who had so little and lost a lot. After all, this was the season of giving. "If only it could be Santa Claus," whispered James. "Just once, just to bring a little joy to those who need it most and to fill the emptiness in my heart." Exhausted, he lay down beneath the tree, his tear-streaked face resting against the rug. The moon peeked through the dirty panes of glass and shone on James as he mumbled words of gratitude and love. Before long, sleep claimed him. Like the faint chime of a distant sleigh bells, a soft jingling pulled James from the depths of restless sleep. Blinking, he sat up and froze. Standing in the dim light was a figure no taller than a child, dressed in a green outfit adorned with gold buttons that shimmered in the light. James rubbed his eyes. "I must be dreaming." The figure smiled, his eyes sparkling like starlight. "Dreams have power, James, but this is far from one. Your heart called out, and we heard." James gasped as the figure extended a hand. What are you?" "I'm here to help you be what you've always wished to be, Santa Claus. Just for one night, for those who need him most." James knew the unmistakable outfit the figure wore was that of an elf costume. Before James could respond, the elf snapped his fingers. The window with its dirty panes of glass warbled as it began to swirl carelessly in the emerging light. The room shimmered, and the window was replaced by a portal of swirling golden light. A rush of cold air filled the room as James was lifted and passed through the portal, where he found himself in a sleigh that seemed to float effortlessly above the streetlights, the sidewalk, and the street of James' apartment. 8 reindeer floated, gently moving up and down in front of the sleigh, their breath puffing out in misty clouds. The elf handed him a bright red coat and pants to match. As James adorned himself with Santa's clothes, the elf prepared a bag that glowed faintly with golden light, and the elf placed the bag on the seat next to James. "We go now," the elf said. "Follow your dream." The icy air stung his cheeks as James guided the sleigh through the quiet streets, but his heart was ablaze with purpose. At each stop, the glowing bag seemed to understand the needs better than he could. For the man huddled in a cardboard box, it produced a heavy quilt that smelled faintly of pine, as if to remind him of home. For the shivering child curled up with her mother at the bus stop, the bag offered a stuffed bear with button eyes and a tiny scarf, along with warm clothes and a pair of bus tickets. Each smile he received felt like a spark melting the ice that had long encased his heart. Stop after stop throughout the city, James was able to help many with the things most of us take for granted. As the sleigh touched down softly beside the old shelter, James noticed a woman sitting on the crumbling stone steps, huddled beneath a shawl, her hands red and raw from the cold, clutched an empty coffee cup as if it might somehow hold more than just air. James hesitated, his breath fogging in the icy night. The bag beside him glowed faintly, and he reached in, pulling out a warm jacket and a steaming container of soup. Stepping forward, he knelt before her. "Ma'am," he said softly, his voice catching in his throat. "This is for you." She looked up, startled. Her eyes, dull and rimmed with exhaustion, met his. For a moment, she didn't speak, her lips trembling as if she'd forgotten how. Slowly, she accepted the jacket, her fingers brushing against his in a fleeting moment of connection. "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Why would you?" James smiled gently. "Because everyone deserves warmth, especially on a night like this." Tears welled in her eyes as she shrugged the jacket over the frail shoulders. "I used to work in that shelter," she murmured, nodding toward the building behind her. "Before they ran out of funding, before I lost everything." James felt the lump form in his throat. He reached into the bag once more, his hand emerging with an envelope. He handed it to her, watching as she stared at it with a mix of confusion and disbelief. "Open it," he encouraged. Her fingers fumbled with the envelope, and when she finally pried it open, she gasped. Inside was a key and a note that read, "Welcome home. There's a room waiting for you inside the shelter. Merry Christmas." The woman clutched the key to her chest, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I don't know what to say," she managed, her voice breaking. "You don't have to say anything," James said, his voice trembling. "Just promise to pay it forward when you can." As she stood, her tears glistening like tiny diamonds in the moonlight, she whispered, "You're not just Santa, you're a miracle." James watched as she stepped inside, the door closing softly behind her. For the first time that night, he felt an ache in his chest, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming joy of seeing someone's life begin to change. He felt an inexplicable happiness, one he hadn't experienced in years. But his heart ached most when he saw a dimly lit apartment with cracked windows. Inside, a little girl, her mother lay on the floor with only a thin blanket and a single pillow between them. James reached into the glowing bag, his fingers brushing against something cool and smooth. He pulled out a small, intricately carved music box, its wooden surface etched with swirls and snowflakes that seemed to shimmer in the faint light. "What's this?" he whispered to himself, marveling at the delicate craftsmanship. The elf's voice echoed in his mind. "This gift holds the power to inspire kindness and change. She will know what to do with it." James hesitated, his breath catching in his throat as he knelt beside the little girl. Her tiny chest rose and fell in peaceful sleep, her frail form wrapped in a too thin blanket. Carefully, he placed the music box beside her hand. As he stood, a single note rang out, a beautiful melody that filled the room like a whisper of hope. For a moment, James thought he recognized the tune, a lullaby from his childhood. He swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "Merry Christmas," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the fading melody. James' heart skipped as he turned to leave. He thought for a moment. He knew this place. Then everything went dark. Morning came and James woke beneath his tree. The faint memory of his nighttime escapades lingered like a shadow. He sighed and whispered to himself, "Just a dream." A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He pulled himself up and straightened up his clothes. He wondered who would be knocking on his door on Christmas Day. When he opened it, he froze. Standing before him were the little girl and her mother from the dream. The girl clutched that same music box he had left behind. "Thank you," the mother said, her eyes filled with gratitude. "We don't know how, but your kindness has given us hope. We found this gift last night and it played the most beautiful melody for us. And as it echoed down the halls, it brought us to you." The girl extended a small envelope and motioned for James to take it and said, "My name is Clara, and this is my mother Mary." James hesitated at first, but accepted the gift and thanked the little girl. He opened the envelope, and inside was a ticket to a private village brunch. Chance for James to enjoy the warmth of the season with others. As he stared at the little girl and her mother, the music box in the girl's hands glowed faintly, and James realized it hadn't been a dream. The universe had heard him, and in answering his wish, had made him part of something magical. The girl and her mother left and headed down the stairs and out the front door of the apartment. James went to the window and opened it. He looked down and watched as the little girl and her mother opened the music box for the homeless on the street, each time taking out an envelope and presenting it to the person in need, and each time the person would suddenly smile as they opened it. Later that morning, James stepped into the warm embrace of the private village brunch. The scent of freshly baked bread and spiced cider filled the air, mingling with the cheerful hum of conversation and the occasional burst of laughter. The room was alive with joy, and James couldn't help but smile as he looked around. He recognized the faces, ones he had helped during his miraculous night as Santa Claus. The man who had received a warm blanket now stood tall in a new coat, chatting with another guest. The mother and child from the bus stop sat at the table, the little girl giggling as she played with her stuffed bear. James felt a tug on his sleeve and turned to see Clara, her face alight with wonder. She gestured around the room, her curls bouncing as she exclaimed, "James, look! Everyone is smiling! It's like Christmas never ends here." James knelt at Clara's level, his hands resting gently on her small shoulders. He studied her face so full of innocence and hope, and his heart swelled with gratitude. "That's because," he began, his voice soft but steady, "when you give people hope, it doesn't just last for a day, it grows, like a seed planted in the snow waiting for the sun." Clara tilted her head, her eyes wide with curiosity. "A seed?" she asked, her fingers fiddling with them of her sweater. James nodded, a gentle smile spreading across his face. "Yes, a seed of kindness. You planted many last night with that music box, and now look. They are blooming all around us." He gestured towards the room where laughter echoed and the scent of hope felt as tangible as the warm air. Clara beamed, her cheeks rosy. "Does that mean I'm a gardener?" James chuckled, his own eyes misting. "The best kind, Clara, a gardener of hearts." James sat in a large comfy chair and had the biggest grin on his face. He was Santa for one night and saw, with the little girl's help, provided for so many. Even if it was only for one day, he had his prayers and wishes answered. Suddenly a door swung open and all could hear the loud laughter and chant of "Ho, ho, ho, Merry Christmas!" In walked the man himself, Santa Claus. He wandered around the room, greeting and hugging people. He then grabbed the little girl's hand and walked up to James. "James," shouted Santa, "I have not forgotten about you on this special Christmas day. Follow me." James followed Santa and the little girl and her mother as they went through a brilliant white door. On the other side was an old building that James remembered had been abandoned for years. But now it looked brand new and was full of life. Santa's eyes twinkled with a knowing warmth as he placed a hand on James' shoulder. James, your heart has always been the greatest gift. Tonight you provided that in the darkest of places, kindness can shine brighter than stars. It's time for that light to guide others. James stared at the building, his voice faltering. This place was abandoned for so long. How? Santa's laughter rang out rich and resonant as though it carried the weight of countless Christmases. Abandoned perhaps, but never forgotten. The world moves slowly when it comes to change, James. It took hard work, determination, and yes, a touch of Christmas magic. Now it stands ready to become a sanctuary, a home for second chances, and it is yours to lead. James swallowed hard, words catching in his throat. I don't know if I can. Santa knelt slightly, meeting James's gaze with an intensity that was both gentle and unwavering. You already have, my boy. Every act of love and kindness plants a seed, and look around you. They are blooming. Trust in your heart, and you'll find the way. Santa stepped back, his crimson coat swirling in a golden breeze. He touched his nose with a playful smile. Now go, James. The world needs your light, and you have a new journey to begin. In a radiant burst of golden light, Santa vanished, leaving behind the faint sound of jingle bells and a warmth that lingered like an embrace. Come, said Clara, we have so much to do this year. James clutched Clara's hand and smiled at Mary as they walked into the newly renovated shelter.